Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I know I've been gone for years, literally, but I'm back and I'm going to be consistent, and that's all I'm going to say on that. I'm not going to make any more promises, I'm not going to say anything else, just hi, sorry for being gone for so long, I'm back and I'm going to stick to it for sure. Banaz Mahmod, an Iraqi Kurdish woman born December 16th in 1985 in the city of Khalidija, which is situated in Iraqi Kurdistan. Banaz was one of 6 children. She had 4 sisters and 1 brother. Her mum was called Baya Mahmod and her dad was called Mahmod. Banaz had a nickname which was Naska, and Naska derives from the Kurdish word Nask, which means beautiful woman. Her sister goes on to add that the reason they called Banaz Naska was because she was a delicate woman, very delicate girl, soft like a lamb. All in all, from what I've gathered from her description, is that Banaz was like an ethereal woman, just really soft and very beautiful. Her sister even goes on to add that she was so beautiful that you could look at her forever. And from the pictures that I will put up of Banaz, you will see that that is a true statement. Between the years of 1993 to 1999, a civil war broke out in Iraqi Kurdistan due to the oppressive dictatorship of Saddam Hussein at the time. And in 1995, Banaz and her nuclear family, so her mum and dad and siblings, as well as her extended family, so grandparents and cousins and uncles, migrated over to the UK, and Banaz's nuclear family specifically migrated to Mitcham, South London. And just like they did, many other Kurdish civilians fled and migrated to other parts of the world, but many also migrated to the UK, specifically London, also South London, forming a Kurdish community in South London where Banaz and her family lived. And obviously they're all coming from the same place, same culture. They formed a community, so everyone kind of knew each other and knew of each other, etc., within South London. It's important to note that the Mahmods were a strict and traditional family. Although they migrated to the UK, a lot of their beliefs and cultural norms and traditions they brought along with them, and it was expected to still be adhered to wherever they were. It was still going to be adhered to, whether it was in Kurdistan or London. These cultural norms, these traditions were still going to be adhered to. I'm just going to give you a bit of context and explain a few of the traditions that they did adhere to or abide by. For instance, let me preface this by saying the traditions I'm going to list is not traditions that everyone in Kurdistan abides by and adheres to. However, this is specific to Banaz's family, and her whole family adhered to these traditions. These are the traditions that they followed, and these are the traditions that are present in tribal areas in Kurdistan, Iraqi Kurdistan to be specific. So like, you know how in the West we're more so like the nuclear family is the most prominent family, and then it goes to extended family. However, it was tradition for them that the extended as well as nuclear were just as important and just as involved and just as prevalent, and they were all to look after each other and take care of each other. And for instance, any wealthy family member within the family, the entire family, was expected to look after the less fortunate family members. So they were expected to offer job opportunities if they were able to, or you'll share assets or financially help. Whatever wealth they had, it was expected for them to share throughout the family. It wasn't a question. And this is not just a nuclear family, this is also extended family. So as you can see already, as I've explained, they were very much so family orientated, to the point where the interests of the family as a whole took precedence over an individual's interests. And the family that one belongs to would define their reputation, their status in the community, in their society, and most importantly, their honour. So much so that the actions of one could impact the entire family's perception by the the community. So it would impact the way the community would perceive their family. So if one person did something wrong, it would impact the whole family. And just to know that you're from this specific family where your cousin or your sister or your brother or your dad did this specific thing, it would follow you and it would plague you, and you would be impacted as well. The only way that a person who abides by these traditions could operate and move throughout their life is by always having the idea to uphold their family's honour in mind at all times. They could never function as an individual, or always as a collective, as a family. How is this going to affect my family? Who do I marry? Is this going to affect my family? If I engage in this, how is this going to affect my family? Not more so me as the individual. It was also a tradition whereby, for example, in the West, the age of parental control ceases at 18, whereas it was tradition for them that a child was to remain living with their parents until they were married, and regardless of what age they got married at. They would only leave their parental home if they got married. And it's also important to note that arranged marriages and child marriages would take place. It's not that they believed in it and would consciously think, yeah, I'm going to marry my child at this specific age, but they didn't see it as anything wrong to marry at such a young age or underage. And then in addition to that, marriage was also seen as endogamous. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Endogamous, which means they were expected to marry within the same social group. So not even someone from a different tribe, someone from because you know, okay, quick side note, Kurdistan, there's Iraqi Kurdistan, Iranian Kurdistan, Syrian Kurdistan, and Turkish Kurdistan, I think, because that's the land is present in all of those countries. So a person from Syrian Kurdistan and Iraqi Kurdistan wouldn't even be able to mix for them, and that's what they believed in, and that's the tradition that they would uphold. It goes without saying that the father or the oldest male of the family was seen as the head and would be respected as such. Whatever they said or whatever their opinion was to be followed by the rest of the family, and their word was just final. And last but not least of the traditions and beliefs that were believed by Banaz's family as well as other Kurdish civilians is that the mistake of a woman was seen as more dire than the mistake of a man. More specifically, it was described that for them, the reason that a man's wrongdoing and a woman's wrongdoing were different is that they would liken a woman to silk and a man to a block of gold. So if you drop a block of gold in dirt, you can just wipe it off and it's gold again, it's shining again. However, if you drop silk in mud, it can never be its rawest silk again. You can't, even if you wash it, even if you manage to somehow get the stain out, it would never still be that pure silk. And on top of that, so if a woman was to go astray or wayward, yes, she would be vilified. However, it would also impact the head of the family, because it would seem as though like you're not in control of your women, because the women for them were seen as an extension of a man, and whatever was permitted was what was on the man's accord, and if they did something wrong, they were wrong for it, and the man or the head of the family was wrong for it too, for failing to prevent the woman from going astray or doing anything wrong. Okay, now I want to move into like the family dynamic, Banaz's family dynamic, before I move into what exactly happened to her and the crux of the case. I just want it to be noted that Mahmod was the oldest brother out of all of his siblings, and as I've just stated, you would think that he was the head of the family, which he wasn't. It was actually his younger brother, Ari Mahmod, who was the head of the family because he was the wealthiest. And it's not said, but I'm just gonna presume that he would help out the rest of the family as is expected in the tradition, and more money, more say, and he's the boss, seen as he's the wealthiest basically. And it's important to note that Mahmod believed or didn't see a problem in child marriage or arranged marriages. And I also want to add that arranged marriage is not bad, forced marriage is. So for example, if two individuals both go to their parents, hey, look, I don't mind if you guys find me a spouse, go ahead, and the parents are successful in finding a spouse that they believe is suitable for their child, if the spouse that they've found is also okay with this being arranged, this marriage being arranged between the two of them, if they both consent and they're okay and pleased with each other, then yes, that is an arranged marriage, but there's nothing wrong with it because both parties consent. It becomes forced when one or both do not consent to it. For Mahmod, he didn't care whether or not they consented to it or not. It was just expected that all of his daughters would be subjected to arranged marriages. And in terms of the child marriage, I don't want to say that it was something that he went forth believing like, yes, I'm gonna subject them to child marriage. It's just that they saw nothing wrong with it. So if an opportunity arose and it was okay for them to get married to this person, or they had a spouse that they believed was right for their child, then it would just take place regardless of whether or not they were underage. Just as, for example, Banaz's sister Payman, she got married at 16 to a man that was 15 years her senior, left home, moved in with him, and that was that. Moving on, Banaz had another sister called Bakar, and Bakar was her older sister. At the time that they had moved over to the UK, which was 1995, they had moved at a time like a pre-pubescent stage, adolescent stage in their lives, and at the time Banaz was 10 years old, but Bakar was a teenager. She was in her teen years, and she started going to school in South London. And I don't know if you guys don't know, if I've got people watching this video that are not from London, London is super multicultural, like super multicultural. There's one place you'll find where, like, especially with children in high school, yeah, you'll find bullying, yeah, you'll find racism. However, most of the time you'll also find like children of different cultures, of all walks of life, whether it's Poland, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's different countries in Africa, like all over the world. They just mix, basically. They become friends, they go out with each other. Like, what country you're from doesn't really matter, it's just who you are. So yeah, I hate the term melting pot, but in essence it's kind of like that. Because she made friends and she was exposed to different cultures, different people, and she had friends from different walks of life. It's at a time where you're forming your identity, you're learning more about yourself, or becoming aware of yourself, and unconsciously even just expressing yourself in ways that you see fit for yourself. And this was happening with Bakar, where she started experimenting with like Western hairstyles, wearing perfume, and doing things aesthetically that wasn't in accordance with her culture at home. So then that would cause like a culture clash, basically. And this resulted in Mahmod physically abusing Bakar, because she was going against the status quo, basically. He would physically abuse her, and this escalated to threats to kill her if she didn't cease mixing with the wrong people or didn't stop doing what she was doing or started doing, which was nothing, but to them, or to him, it was just a complete no. So out of fear and just having enough of the abuse, Bakar ran away from home and she was placed in foster care. Now, a child is not meant to leave the home unless she's married, or unless they're married. Bakar had run away, been placed in foster care, so she's left the home. The parents don't know where she is. She's run away. She's not married. So this, in the eyes of the community, is a complete dishonour against her dad, against her uncle, who is the head of the family. Her dad would contact her incessantly, asking her, like, please come back home. He even went as far as to try and manipulate her by saying, like, if you don't come back home, I'll kill myself. And thankfully, Bakar didn't succumb to his manipulation, and she stayed away and didn't come back home, because she knew her fate was going to be horrid if she did come back. And as she didn't come back and went into further hiding, this was a complete dishonour for the family. And dishonour wasn't just a stain on your family's perception. it resulted in being ostracized from the rest of the Kurdish community and not being rated and not being respected and just being seen as like, you don't even have control over your girl, like you don't even have control over your daughter. What's going on with you? Are you a man, or what's going on? That's how it was perceived. Because Bakal in their eyes had done the unthinkable, her father came up with a plan to rectify the situation and in essence restore his honour. Bakal would keep in contact with her younger brother secretly. Somehow her father became aware of this and used this to his advantage, and he basically ordered her brother to lure Bakal in. So let me explain it. So her brother contacted Bakal saying, hey, listen, I need to meet up with you. I need to meet up with you. Bakal was like, okay, fine, where should we meet up? So they met up at a remote park. Before coming, her brother instructed her to bring a huge suitcase alongside with her. She didn't think anything of it. It's whatever. And then when they got to the park, they were walking along the pathway, but then her brother was just like, walk ahead of me and don't look back. So she did that. She walked in front, and next thing you know, her brother ran up behind her with a dumbbell, bashed over the head with it, and then got her into a headlock from behind. You know, when traumatic events like this happen, you either go into fight or flight mode, and Bakal went into fight mode, and she basically bit the inside of his arm. So he has her like this. She bit the inside of his arm in an effort to like get out and get away from him and defend herself, and she bit him really, really hard where like he let go, and she turned around and she was like, look at what you're doing to me. You're literally trying to kill me. I'm your sister. You're literally trying to kill me. And she even goes on to say that he started crying like a woman. These are her words. He started crying hysterically, sobbing and saying like, I'm sorry, you know, I'm the boy, I'm the big boy, I'm the boy of the family, and Dad's told me like I need to restore this family's honor. I'm sorry. He even paid me to do this. He paid me money to come and kill you and restore the family's honor. Bakal managed to get away. She didn't press any charges against her brother. I'm guessing it's because she understood the pressure he was under, and yeah, she didn't press any charges against him. She didn't call police against anyone. She just ran away. She ran away and stayed away and went into deep further hiding and cut off all contact completely. Mahmod hadn't succeeded in getting Bakal to return home, and he hadn't succeeded in restoring his honor by killing her, because her even returning home at that point wouldn't even make a difference, because she had dishonored her family by leaving in the first place and staying away despite them making several efforts to get her to come back. So the only way this could be rectified in his mind, it was to kill her. As soon as she escaped and went into further deep hiding and cut off all contact with everyone, Mahmod fought to restore his honor, or the family's honor, in a different way. So in an effort to restore his honor and the honor of the family, Banaz was subjected to a forced marriage at the age of 17 to a man who was 10 years her senior, from the city of Khalidija, where she was from. After she was married, she moved to Birmingham, dropping out of college. And I also want to note that the college were aware that she was leaving because she had gotten married, and that's major alarm bells, because she's 17, underage, and being pulled out of college and moving to a whole different city. Like, no safeguarding was done. College didn't intervene at all. She was just, they just knew, and that was it. They just knew. And when Banaz had moved to Birmingham, she had made several calls to the police, because the marriage was abusive. Her husband was horribly abusive. He would physically abuse her, rape her, berate her on a regular basis, almost on a daily basis. It got so bad that after only a year of marriage, Banaz had enough and just left him and moved back to London. But she moved in with her sister, Payman, who was the first one I mentioned who got married. Moved in with her and her husband. Her parents didn't know that she had moved back from Birmingham at the time, and she was staying with her sister, and then she confided in her sister about what was happening and how he would treat her, etc. And her sister, rightfully so, reported back to her parents like, hey, look, this is what's happening with Banaz. This is bad, this is horrid, we need to do something about this, basically. So a family meeting was called where her husband was also expected to attend, Banaz was expected to attend. Her parents confronted him with like, hey, look, this is what Banaz is saying, this is what you're doing to her, you're abusing her. And he wasted no time, he admitted to it. He was like, yeah, I do that, and that's because she's badly behaved. In his terms, badly behaved means refusing to sleep with him and just not kowtowing to his every demand or need. So that means badly behaved, and that warrants the abuse and everything that he would put her through. And instead of her family to be like, what monster of a man is this? No. They said, if you divorce him, that's another stain on the family. That's another dishonour. So I'm sorry, love, you've got to go back to him. You've got to go back to Birmingham and work on being a better wife. And as it was expected, you also have to note that these beliefs and traditions, the girls were aware that this ain't right, but they were also indoctrinated with them. So like, it was easy to manipulate them. It was easy to scare them into doing things that they didn't want to do out of fear of dishonouring the family and how much strife would come upon them should they go against the family. So they would do this against their will and just, yeah. Banaz went back to him against her will, and when she went back, the abuse actually, I don't know how it could have, but it basically got even more intense. And he would say things like, you know, your family loves me more than they love you. Where do you think you're gonna go? Things like that. Like really putting her down, and he would go all out with his abuse because he saw that her family didn't even support her, didn't even care for her. They were on his side more so. They corroborated what he had to say by advising her to go back and work on being a better wife. It just came to one day where Banaz just flipped and said, nah, I'm not dealing with this no more. And this was just one day where he came home and he was just doing his usual, berating her and putting her down, and she just snapped. She took his phone, called her mum, screaming down the phone saying, I am done. I don't care what it takes. I don't care whatever. I want a divorce today, now, pronto, now. I'm not doing this no more. And one thing I've got to say about the Mahmod girls, they are brave, they are strong, I really admire them. Even in the midst of all of this, they would still stand up, they would still find strength from the depth and rise up for what was right for them. And even in the midst of all that fear and abuse, and they would still rise up and look after themselves and stand up for themselves. And that's one thing I really respect. She was not hearing any of it. She was not hearing, oh, maybe try it. Nope, she wasn't having none of it. She's like, I've enjoyed it for too long. So after 2 years of marriage, she divorced him and came back home. However, for Mahmod, her dad, this was abysmal, because this was 2 of his girls now that had gone wayward. You had one that had run away from home without being married, and the other that was a divorcee now. Banaz divorcing her husband was seen as something really bad, and enough for her husband to even like spread rumours and say things about her which would also stain the family. And just having a divorcee is just frowned upon completely, especially her initiating the divorce as a woman. It was just absolutely hell no. So like I said, this was like dishonour number 2, and his girls had gone wayward, and further ostracizing him, loss of status, even more loss of status, and it was just an embarrassment for him and his family in terms of their tradition. In reality, it's not, but for their beliefs, yes, it was. So Banaz had come home and she was finally becoming back to her old self. She was around her family, her siblings, and just happier, not in that toxic environment anymore. And in that time, Banaz met a man called Salamani, and they fell in love. They loved each other, and they would always talk, they would always be texting each other. Like, that was her babes. Like, she loved him and he loved her the same way. The only thing is, like I mentioned earlier, it was tradition for them to get married endogamous, meaning they would only supposed to get married within the same social group. And he was from Iran. Rahmat was from Iran, so already that was a no. And on top of that, you're a recent divorcee, and now you're seeing another man. Yeah, no, they were not they didn't approve of it. They weren't happy with it at all. So then Banaz in a way had to start seeing him in secret and go about her ways in secret. Banaz would go out and she started to realise that she was being stalked by like cousins and uncles and whatnot. She would always see them around, like wherever she was going, she would always see them. It even got to a point where one time she just left her house and was going somewhere, and then someone rolled up by her and was just like, I think you should get in my car, and she was like, what, no? And then she went about her day. However, that same car followed her everywhere she went that whole day. Banaz believed that the people were stalking her because her ex-husband had sent them to do so, not knowing that now that her family were aware that she was seeing someone new, they wanted to stalk her to make sure that she wasn't seeing him, even when she was outside of the house. So they wanted complete control over her. And she knew that this was a bad sign, so she went to the police and sat down, made a statement, a thorough statement. I'm going to include a link to her police interview where she relays all of the abuse that she went through with her husband, and also adding that, you know, I'm being stalked and people follow me everywhere I go. And her reason for coming to the police station and giving a statement was that just in case something happens to me, it's one of these people I'm telling you about. Like, don't think I've just gone or I'm just missing. Like, I'm letting you know, don't do anything. She specifically says, don't do anything, don't get involved. But should anything happen to me, it's these people. She even goes on to ask, her last question, which is really haunting, was, so now that I've given my statement, or now that I've told you everything, what can you do for me? And in the clip that I'm going to include, you can see that the police officer was, or the officer, whoever that person is, doesn't really says a lot without saying anything really. Doesn't give her any assurance or any hope. When really and truly, Banaz had relayed everything that had happened up until then, and if the police were also aware, what would have happened now that Banaz has come to the police would have also flagged up that her sister was in hiding and running away due to the family issues. And if she's flagging up that she may be in danger, regardless of if she's saying, oh, I don't want anyone involved or I don't want your help, it is still expected for police and people who work within that sector they have a duty of care to safeguard her regardless of what she's saying. If what she's disclosed is that I will be harmed, or even worse, I'm at risk of being killed, and when she says don't get involved, that's besides the point. They are supposed to get involved. They could have put a DVPNO, which is a domestic violence notice, whereby they would remove Banaz from her home, put her in a safe accommodation, whether it would be a women's refuge or a self-contained like flat, her own studio or her own flat, which was far away from her family, cutting off all contact, changing her number. Like, they could have really safeguarded her, because they would have seen from what she had disclosed that she was in danger. Yet none of that was done. The officer even says in the recorder, I'm going to add that, oh yeah, we're going to make some lines of inquiries.
Now that I'm giving this statement, what can you do for me? Like,
you've given us lines of inquiry that we will need to follow up.
Okay.
But we will let you know of what's going on as it's happening, really, just so that you're kept informed and up to date as to what's going on. Okay.
In reality, it took them like 3 months to actually follow up and log her statement. So yes, after making that police report, Banaz still went about her ways, obviously presumably waiting on hearing back from the police about her statement, and just went about her life, seeing Rahma in private, in secret, etc. However, one day she had met up with Rahma and they had spent the day together, spent some time together, and it was time for him to go. And she was caught outside of Morden Station from afar. She was seen from afar outside of Morden Station by one of her family members, or one of the people that knew her family. And she was seen kissing Rahma goodbye. Yeah. So when whoever saw her, when they saw this, they went straight and contacted Ari. Remember, Ari is her uncle, the head of the family. Let him know, look up what she's doing on the main road. Like, this is what I saw her doing. Bad enough she's been divorced. Bad enough she's seeing someone that they don't approve of. Seeing him against their will, and now you're caught kissing him in public. Yeah, no. Just no. for them. So Banaz actually overheard a conversation between Ari and her mum, whereby Ari called her mum, letting her know that they were serious. They are going to restore the honour of the family, and they were serious about making plans to kill Banaz. So on the 12th of December 2005, Banaz had written a letter as a follow-up to the crime report she had made, like as a follow-up to her statement that she had made, stating that she had overheard this conversation and that plans were being made to kill her. But I'm just letting you know in advance, should anything happen to me, this is what's happened.
A letter that was delivered by Banaz to her local police station on or around the 12th of December 2005. In it, she has given details of people that she has heard were going to be responsible for killing her. Numbers 2, 3, 4 and 5 have said that they're ready and willing to do the job of killing me and my boyfriend, and this was said by my uncle Ari Mahmod while my uncle was on the phone to my mum on the 2nd of December at around 6 to 7 that evening. He also said that he's going to kill me and my boyfriend Ramat, and it's signed Banaz Mahmod.
Yeah. And that letter she just said, yeah, these are the people responsible should anything happen to me, and still nothing happened. Yeah. So like I said, Banaz had sent the letter on the 12th of December 2005. Fast forward to New Year's Eve of 2005. Banaz's dad just went up to her and said, you're expected to come to your grandma's house in Wimbledon. Just to note, remember I told you that her extended family had also migrated over to the UK, more specifically South London as well. Just so happened that her grandma settled in Wimbledon and they settled in Mitcham. So yeah, he said you're expected to come to your grandma's house in Wimbledon to discuss your divorce and what you're going to do moving forward, like just to discuss what has happened basically. And she was none the wiser. She said okay, and she was going to turn up there. And he also instructed her to bring a giant suitcase with her, a big suitcase with her. She thought nothing of it and she brought it because that's what her dad said. So she turned up at her grandma's. What she didn't know is that her dad had brought with him some brandy. Yes, alcohol. But he had brought some alcohol, some brandy, and basically forced her to drink it. Made her down copious amounts of brandy. Obviously an effort to get her extremely drunk, like debilitated, unable to move and whatnot. And when he saw that she had reached a state of drunkenness that he was pleased with, or what he was aiming for, he sat her down on the sofa, which was facing the TV, told her to face forward and just watch TV and not dare turn around and look at what he was doing. Banaz had, although she was drunk, Banaz still had the wits about her to look behind swiftly just to see what her dad was doing, because I obviously instructed her not to, so she just did it. And then she saw that he was wearing trainers, she saw that he had gloves, and then she just put two and two together and realised, like, I'm gonna die. Basically, she realised that she was gonna die. Her dad left the room momentarily, and in that time she bit the bullet and just ran for it. So she ran for the back door, and luckily, thankfully, it was open, it wasn't locked. So she ran for the back door, jumped over the gate, the fence into her neighbour's garden, and punched through the window in an effort to get the attention of someone to get some help. Bear in mind, this is New Year's Eve, so I don't know whether the neighbours were in or not, and if they were in, they were probably having a party, and if they weren't, they were probably out, like, celebrating New Year's Eve, so it would be hard to get anyone's attention at that time or anything of the sort. So when she saw that that didn't work quick enough, she ran onto the main road somehow from their garden, ran onto the main road and collapsed in front of a cafe where civilians called an ambulance on her behalf, because she was bleeding from her feet and from her wrists profusely from punching the window. So Banaz managed to escape and get help and be put in an ambulance and be brought to hospital. And when she got to the hospital, it is noted that the hospital staff say that they had never ever seen anyone as terrified as Banaz. They had never come across a patient who was so scared as much as Banaz was at the time. She was so terrified. She was still very, very drunk and trying to explain, like, hey, my dad's trying to kill me, I'm in danger. She even passed over Rahmat's number and told them to contact him, and he came as quick as possible. When he found out what happened, she relayed to him, like, look, my dad tried to kill me. And Rahmat was smart enough to know, like, he basically, although she was on the stretcher and still like very drunk and inebriated, he still videoed her recanting what had taken place that night.
فردسان همو داد رابون و تاریک بو هر تلویزیون تاو کرابو نام سعودي دوباره شخش هاتو كالك رشي لبربون يروبو بس كشتي شين لا كشو دابرو مداري ايش سيدانش خوتي او الشام دانش ما حتى اوتو يجرى كيدي في دوباره زاد هذا هم لدرجاكي أي دستف back garden اللي ليش كيو ببصير خليت دوبي ده خلاص من تفاصيل.
And after some time, police showed up because obviously the allegations that Banaz was making against her dad and what she had explained that took place that night was alarming. So they had called the police for assistance, and when police turned up, guys, can you believe that police didn't believe her when she explained what happened? The officer in particular, her name's Angela Cornes, or Cornes, I don't know. She didn't believe her, stating that she thought Banaz was just a Muslim girl who had drank too much for New Year's Eve and she was scared about what her parents would say now that she was drunk, and she was just making up stories to not get in trouble, basically. So she just did not believe her at all. She even went as far as reporting back to Mahmod, her dad, the allegations that Banaz had made, or just letting him know that Banaz had said this about the situation, putting her into further danger. So after the hospital, Banaz moved in with Rahma and started staying with him for some time. She kind of like cut off ties and contact with her family for a while. But after some time, after like a few days, her family managed to get in contact with her and kind of like had a soft approach and were like, could we please meet with you at the local McDonald's and just talk about what's going on? And when she did, they managed to manipulate her once more and convince her that her relationship with Rahmat was haram, and her living with him, even though she's not married to him, was haram. And like I said earlier, as brave and as strong as the Mahmod sisters were, it is still important to note that they were indoctrinated with these beliefs and cultural norms and traditions, and it wasn't hard for her family to manipulate her and make her feel guilty and make her feel like a bad person for going against their status quo, which was so drummed into her mind. So yeah, she was just like, yeah, you're right. And she moved back in with her family. She broke up with Rahma and told him like, yeah, you know, it's haram, and in reality we can't be doing this, so I'm gonna leave, and we're to break up, basically. Banaz broke up with Rahma and expressed like, you know, our relationship is haram, we're not even married, I can't really stay with you, and it's a good idea for us to break up because all of this chaos that's coming upon me is because I'm with you and seeing you, so let's just leave it, basically. And yeah, they broke up, but that breakup didn't last long because, like I said, they loved each other, they were besotted with each other, and they just agreed to continue to see each other, but in secret, like completely in secret. And they would just secretly message each other and delete message. Well, she would message him, delete the messages after. Like, she was very, very secretive about how she would be in contact with him. In the days that Banaz had returned back home, an attempt was made to kidnap Rahmat from one of the people that would stalk Banaz, but luckily Rahmat was able to escape, and he had informed Banaz of this attempted kidnap and letting her know like, look, it's serious right now, they even tried to kidnap me. And Banaz responded to his message informing her of like this attempted kidnap by saying, just be careful, Rahmat Gyan, please, because I don't think I could live a second without you. I love you so much, XXXXXXX. I also want to note that the word Gyan in the Kurdish language means like darling or love. That's the text that she sent back, and Rahmat wouldn't know that that's the last text he would ever receive from Banaz. On the 25th of January, Rahmat reported Banaz missing because he had not heard from her since the 23rd, and that was not like her at all. She spoke to him all day, every day. There wouldn't be a day that missed where she wouldn't have messaged him or contacted him in any way. So he started to worry, and already an attempt had already been made to kidnap him. An attempt had already been made to murder Banaz. He was frantic, so he went to the police and reported her missing. And the police was like, okay, so they went to her family and asked, like, just to inquire, like, where's Banaz? Is everything okay? What's going on with Banaz? And her parents responded to the police saying, Banaz now is a big woman, and sometimes she goes out and stays out at her friends and whatnot. She does this quite often, so she should be back any day soon. We're not worried, basically. So the police were like, okay, cool, no problem. A few days later, Rahmat followed up and was trying to inquire, like, okay, what's going on? She's missing. Have you heard anything? What did the family say? And they were like, oh yeah, don't worry. Her family have said that she's okay. She goes out and stays with her friends from time to time. So this is normal behavior for her. And he was like, no. In fact, they're really strict. That wouldn't have even been allowed. And he even went on to explain everything that had happened with Bakal and the letters that she had sent over to the police and statements that she had made previously, and that's what prompted them to look even further, like go back and look at the letters thoroughly and rewatch like her interview with the police where she gives her statement about what's happened to her. And in that letter they were able to basically, she had given them the names of the people who would be responsible, and they had 5 people of interest. Yeah, 5 people of interest that could have been involved in doing something to her or kidnapping her, or the reason as to why she was missing, basically. The initial letter, before she sent the second letter listing the names of the people, was sent on the 5th of December. So when they looked at that letter and then the letter that was sent on the 12th of December listing the names of the people that would be involved, the names being Mahmod, her dad, Ari Mahmod, the head of the family, her uncle, Mohammed Hama, Muhammad Ali, and Omar Hussein, who 3 of them were her cousins. Those were the names of the 5 people who she listed who would be involved or responsible if should anything happen to her, basically. So they had 5 people of interest. So when this was relayed back to Rahmat, he was able to identify Mohammed Hama, one of the cousins, because Mohammed Hama was the one who actually attempted to kidnap him. So he was arrested and he was in custody, but in the times that he was arrested, they had a reason to hold him in because he attempted to kidnap Rahmat. They went ahead with a full search and a full investigation as to where Banaz was, basically. They searched different houses in London and they searched her family's house again. And during this time, when they're doing this investigation, when it's like cranked up now, they do note that her family, so like her nuclear family, her parents did not make any attempts to follow up and find out, have you found her, so what's going on. Didn't care to know anything about the case. It was mainly Rahmat and Bakal that were concerned for her and that were pushing for the police to continue to search for Banaz. Bakal was contacted after they had looked at the letters and traced back, and her name obviously flagged up as related to Banaz. And when they went to see her and visit her and find out, like, basically Banaz is missing, do you know what could have possibly happened to her? Listen to this, is what your family's saying, that she sleeps over at friends' houses sometimes, so this is normal. Banaz was like, absolutely not. Something's happened to her and they're responsible. Please find my sister, basically. So that even cranked up their investigation some more. They tried to make inquiries within the community, you know, to find out, like, has anyone heard anything about Banaz or what's happened to Banaz? None of them wanted to help because they were all on the same accord as these 5 individuals, as Mahmod, the dad, as Ari Mahmod, that Banaz was a dishonourable woman and they're not going to help to find her, because if she's dead or if she's kidnapped or if something's happened to her, it's deserving because she went against the status quo, basically. So in the time that Mohammed Hama was in police custody, their phones, the people of interest's phones had been tapped and their GPS had been tapped. Like the car that they would use to go around had been tapped also. And what they noticed is that their car would drive back and forth from Birmingham quite a lot, and they noticed that when they would go to Birmingham, the car would be parked outside a specific house. But how it came to be revealed what happened to Banaz is that Mohammed Hammer was in custody and he was on the phone to someone, and in fact he was boasting. He was showing off about what had happened to Banaz and what they had all done to Banaz and how they had in fact killed Banaz. Yes, because at this point that's when they found out that Banaz was actually dead. And what had happened was, on the morning of the 24th of January 2006, Banaz's parents had left in the morning to go and drop her youngest sister, leaving Banaz sleeping on the floor in her living room. She slept on the floor in her living room because there wasn't enough space as she had moved back, and yeah, it was just the norm for her to sleep on the living room floor. And when she had left, the 3 of her cousins who I just listed had entered the room and subjected Banaz to hours of torture, rape, strangulation, physical abuse, beating, all of that. So they overheard him talking and boasting about it. But in that specific conversation, he reveals, and then we buried her under the freezer in the garden. Their car would be traced back and forth from Birmingham. When they would be in Birmingham, a helicopter would hover over the property that they would be inside of, just for surveillance and to see what was happening and what they would be doing. And when he mentioned freezer, it clicked in their mind, wait, hold on, in the video that we had seen, or of the police surveillance, there's a freezer in the back garden. So they bolted over there and dug up the ground and found Banaz in a suitcase in a fetal position. And yeah, her body had been found. So obviously this case had gone from a missing persons case to a homicide. And Mohammed Hammer had basically told on everyone, himself, every single person that was involved, the dad. He explained how the dad knew. He had also explained how they had tortured her and listed who was involved and how they got away and how they did everything. 5 whole months after detailing exactly what would take place and who would be responsible for her murder, it had been revealed in those 5 months by Mohammed Hammer that he was responsible, as well as her cousins, her dad and her uncle, directly implicating them with what had happened. So on April 28th 2006, her body was found and recovered from beneath the freezer that he had spoken about, and she was found in a suitcase in a fetal position. May 1st, Ari Mahmod was arrested, and in August of that same year, Mahmod was also arrested for being involved in the murder of Banaz. But soon after the murder, the other 2 cousins, Omar Hussein and Muhammad Ali, fled back to Kurdistan. The first 3 trials took place within the space of 14 weeks at the Central Criminal Court, which is also known as the Old Bailey, and all 3 were given life sentences. And I also want to note that Rahmat and Bakal were both brave enough to testify against Banaz's family and explain the abuse that she had gone through and what they would subject her to and what was expected of her. Bakal was in a full niqab, not a hijab, but a full niqab. A full niqab is like where your face is covered and you can just only see your eyes, and from head to toe you're in an abaya. And she only took it off for the jewellery behind the screen. Despite knowing how dangerous it could be, despite knowing how much danger she would be in, she still had the guts and the strength to stand up and testify against her family. Rahmat the same. Although he was Iranian, they still upheld the similar traditions. They were still expected that you're not supposed to be involved. She's a divorced woman. All of this wasn't supposed to take place. They're well within her rights to want to have killed Banaz. And he was also facing being ostracized by his community, and not only that, his family back home were also being threatened and hurt just for him testifying against their family. But despite that, and to honour Banaz and because of the love they had for Banaz, they didn't care and they did it anyway. And after that, they were subjected to intimidation and they had to be put in police protection. And since that time, Bakara never leaves the house without a full niqab on. She just doesn't, because the second anybody that knows her or any family member sees her, that's it, it's a wrap, she's done, she's going to be killed. So just for her own safety and her own peace of mind, she doesn't leave the house without a niqab, a full niqab. But back in Kurdistan at this time, or not at this time, so now it's 2007, over a year later, Muhammad Ali, one of the cousins, had been arrested for killing a teenage boy in a car accident. And when he had been arrested, his name flagged up as wanted in the UK. The UK were successful in having him extradited from Iraq, or Iraqi Kurdistan, to the UK. And this was the first extradition between Iraq and UK. So this actually goes down in history. And this took place June 2009. For Hussein, he was okay when he moved back to Kurdistan because two of his brothers worked in police intelligence. So they had a lot of money and he was protected by them. However, he had a falling out with one of his brothers, which resulted in him getting shot in the leg. So he needed to go to the hospital for his wound, and when he went to the hospital, his name flagged up as wanted in the UK, and he was also extradited back to the UK. However, he tried to lie and say, I wasn't in the UK at the time of the crime, I've been living in Kurdistan all this time. But his benefits records, as well as picture proof, like picture evidence of previous arrests of his in the UK, proved that he was there at the time of Banaz's death. Muhammad Ali as well as Omar Hussein were both extradited and also given a life sentence for the murder of Banaz. So in terms of Banaz's funeral, it was expected that Banaz's family would organise a funeral in her honour. The family had told the police that a funeral had been organised, and they had said that this would take place at the Regent's Park Mosque, when in reality they lied, and this funeral took place at a mosque in Tooting. And once the police became aware of this, they also followed suit to Tooting, only to realise that actually no funeral plans had been made. They had in fact left Banaz's body out on the street whilst they went in for prayers, and then she was buried, basically. No headstone, no nothing, just buried. So they didn't really honour her life or do a memorial service for her or anything of the sort. Nothing. And I'm sure by now you know why that is, because to them, to her family, and to members of the community, it was right that she was dead. It was right that the dad tried to restore his honour in the way that he did. So yeah, no funeral plans were made. There wasn't an outcry from the Kurdish community basically for Banaz's death or support, or anyone in support of Banaz basically, other than the police and the women of the organisations that were involved or present now that they were aware that this was an honour killing. And an honour killing obviously stands as one of the main violences against women. So yeah, women organisations were present as well, obviously to also inform the police, because as you can see, the way in which they dealt with this, they had no idea about the extent of this. It only came about as Banaz had died and as they investigated. So other organisations that were more, for lack of a better word or phrase, clued up on what this was and giving cultural context to this. So women organisations were also involved, as well as the police. And the women organisations were also involved to stand as Banaz's support, to stand in as Banaz's support and to help honour her name. But her family, although the person supposed to be doing this would have had to have been her family, it wasn't. The police have even stated that they believe it was their presence after appearing at Tooting, at the mosque in Tooting, that forced them to have somewhat of a funeral or put something together for Banaz, which was basically burying her, but they didn't have a headstone, there wasn't many people. Yeah, On the 26th of June 2007, a memorial service was held in Banaz's honour. Her family didn't attend. None of her family members attended. It was mainly the officers that were in charge of her case and the officers that solved her case, as well as the women who were in support of Banaz, part of the women organisation. Her memorial was held at Morden Assembly Home, and this memorial followed with a headstone, a granite headstone, being placed at Banaz's gravesite just for her honour, and because that's what she deserved, that's what was right. So her family didn't stand up for her, but the police did. Got justice for Banaz, so she was really connected to this case, and she ensured that a funeral took place, as well as the help of the women. The women organisation is called the Iranian and Kurdish Women's Rights Organisation, so they were also involved in this, and they supported with the purchase of Banaz's headstone. I also want to add that Rahmat, her partner, he was the true hero in this story, who saw to it that she got the help, who saw to it that the police investigated. However, after Banaz's murder and the attempt being made to kidnap him, he was placed in witness protection, and even further witness protection because he had also testified in court against Banaz's family. And bear in mind, guys, he testified in court, like I said earlier, against the will of his own family and his own community. He risked all of that, being ostracized by his family, his community, put his life in danger to ensure that Banaz had been honoured and justice was served for Banaz. So for me, he's really a true hero. And if it wasn't for him, no one would have said that Banaz was missing. No one would have flagged it up. You also have to note that Banaz didn't have many friends, to be honest. She left college at 17. She got married, and then all the abuse and everything else that was happening, she didn't have the time or the possibility to make friends, like really close friends like that. So she really had Rahmat and her sister Payman, really. However, I'm gonna say it's really sad, he was unable to adjust to his new life of like isolation, and it's reported that he never really recovered from Banaz's death, and in 2016 he had committed suicide by hanging. That right there is so tragic, it's so horrible, and these two innocent people who were just simply innocently in love, and it had to end this way based on some bullshit tradition. I don't care, some bullshit tradition that doesn't even make sense. And you know what I said earlier, a woman's misbehaviour and a man's misbehaviour. Guys, just look at this video, like think about everything that I've just explained. Who is abhorrently at fault here? The men, right? And they're not dead. If anything, they're still sitting in that cell with pride, with oomph in their chest, because in their head they still restored the honour. They still have people who support this, who support them for what they did. As expected, several complaints were made about the police's handling of Banaz's case from the get-go, from when she appeared and made her statement, and from the numerous calls she had been making since she was in that abusive marriage. And even up until it was too late, they didn't intervene. They didn't do anything. They had everything at their hands, all the information to intervene. But they didn't, so complaints have been made. As a response to this, or as a result of this, the Independent Police Complaints Commissioner at the time, Nicola Williams, she came out and made a statement stating that the police's failure was due to, I'm going to list it, poor supervision, lack of understanding and insensitivity. Written warnings were sent out to officers who were present or who had shown up. And the one officer that I spoke about earlier, the one that thought that Banaz was lying, she was expected to appear before a disciplinary board, and she still upheld her stance, like, how was I supposed to know? I didn't know that she wasn't lying. I just assumed that she was. I have no reason to give, but I just assumed that she was. In a nutshell, she was given a telling off and a simple warning. She still continued in her role. So much so, she got promoted. Despite further endangering her, literally having the responsibility to look after her, had they intervened at that point, she would still be alive today. Had they given her information that she wouldn't have known, where it's like, you know, we can get you away from this place, you know, we can help you, you don't have to endure this, we can put you in a refuge. ensuring her that way and intervening to help her that way, they didn't. Only warnings were given out, words of advice, and a slap on the wrist. And they still kept their roles, they still kept their posts in the police. And like I said, she even got promoted. So that's that. You know, this story has really stuck with me for some years since I ever heard about it. I think I heard about it when I was in uni, and because I studied criminology, and yeah, it really stuck with me. It's so tragic, and I really thought it was important to share this case as well with you guys. And this video is in honor of Banaz Mahmod, also known as Naska. Rest in peace to Banaz. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Bye.